you're studying British politics at any level, then the current Brexit crisis is a good way of getting to grips with understanding how parliamentary sovereignty works. Parliamentary sovereignty being a real pillar of the UK constitution. Let's start with the basics. So we elect, as citizens, we elect MPs who go to Parliament, and once that Parliament is elected, a government emerges from it. Crucially, the point about parliamentary sovereignty in respect to that is that government has no power in and of itself. Its power is granted from Parliament. So once Parliament has been established, and normally what would happen with our two-party system is that, with the first past the post system, you end up with two major parties at least. What tends to happen is that you have a party with a majority and a clear winner emerges, and that winner can command the authority of the House of Commons, and the House of Commons therefore gives that government of the day the authority to put through its programme. Obviously, when there's a minority government, and we've got a minority government at the moment, a government that is relying on the 10 votes of the DUP to survive, things become very, very different. Now, I think the best way to look at this is, because it can be a very chaotic situation. We've seen so much over the last few weeks of things which people are saying are unprecedented. And that could be really confusing, and people will be thinking, well, how do I use this in an essay? Why is this helpful? This just looks like a jumbled up mess. So let's make it tidy. And I think the best way to make it tidy is to separate the structure of government from the ebbing and flowing of political life. The politics that happens on a day-to-day basis in the House of Commons and on TV and in the newspapers, let's put that to one side at the moment and just consider the structure, which, as I say, is parliamentary sovereignty. Parliament is always sovereign. If the government's doing something, the government's doing it because Parliament has allowed the government to do it. So what is changing here in terms of that? Well, absolutely nothing. Because it's still the same situation. That does not change. What is changing is the support that Parliament is giving to the government as that daily politics travels along its course. And that is ebbing and flowing, because sometimes Parliament is agreeing with what the government is doing, and sometimes Parliament is trying to claw back some of that power that it has granted the government. We are in unusual times, but it is not too difficult to grasp if you just take that as the process. The process is that in ordinary circumstances, Parliament gives the government power. In these circumstances, Parliament is taking some of that power back. Now that creates a vacuum, because that can't last forever. And that can't last forever because government needs to function. In the Constitution, it needs to function, or else there will be other options that come into play. Now those options, well, there's a variety of possibilities. In the current situation, now last night there was a situation where Parliament voted on what was Oliver Letwin's amendment to a government motion allowing Parliament to come up with indicative votes on possible Brexit outcomes. The government doesn't need to adhere to them, but obviously with Parliament being sovereign, the government might want to take some of those seriously. We will see. Now, if this situation carries on for much longer, the possibilities, I think there are three of them. The first is that there is a change of leadership within the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party would hope that the new leader would be able to command the authority of the House of Commons. The key thing in all of these scenarios is to change the situation so that Parliament is granting the government the power that it needs, whatever that government may look like. Because that is currently what is lacking occasionally because of this ebbing and flowing of Parliament sometimes agreeing with the government and sometimes not. So there are days when Parliament is clawing back that power. So whatever happens next has got to try to resolve that situation and come to a setting where the future government has the command of the House of Commons, and the House of Commons has granted that government the power that it needs to get its legislation through. So one option is getting a different leader of the Conservative Party. That leader would hope that Parliament would provide it with a majority and that government would be able to succeed. Because obviously what we've seen over the last few weeks is ministers resigning, we've seen ministers even abstaining on votes which they were supposed to support the government in. So that brings into question things like cabinet collective responsibility as well, which seems to be a little bit fractured at the moment. Again, a situation that can't last forever. Another possibility is the government loses a vote of no confidence, and there would then be an opportunity for another government to emerge, but the arithmetic of the House of Commons makes it very difficult for Labour to come up with the numbers it needs, again, to command the authority of the House of Commons. So the chances of, in the current Parliament, for Labour to get granted the powers it needs from that Parliament is very, very slim. So the other option is a general election, and a general election would be held purely to ensure that there is a majority for a new government to emerge with the powers to do whatever they say they're going to do in their manifesto. Now that could come along because of a vote of no confidence against the current government, or it could come along because the current Prime Minister and the current government want one, or it could come about because there's a change in leadership in the Conservative Party and that new leader wants a mandate from the people. So those are the three options that will happen one way or another. There is, of course, actually a fourth one, which is that Theresa May carries on, but she changes tack and she gets the support of the House of Commons. That one seems incredibly unlikely because she seems very, very set in what she's attempting to do. So I don't imagine that one's going to happen. But all of these political things that are changing day to day, one thing remains the same, and that's the thing that you can get your head around, which is the Constitution isn't changing. Parliamentary sovereignty still exists. What's happening is the ebbing and flowing of each day brings a different kind of picture of how that parliamentary sovereignty looks, but it still remains exactly the same. And right now is a perfect time to be observing it and to be able to somehow talk about this, if you can, in your work is really helpful. It's very, very rare, this situation. The last time we had a situation like this was 1979, when Jim Callaghan's Labour government was on the rocks, and that didn't just happen overnight either. There was day-to-day issues, and it wasn't just a simple matter of a vote of no confidence and that was it. It took a while for Margaret Thatcher's Conservative opposition to get to the stage where they could actually properly challenge. And it's going to take a while, I think, for Labour to be in that situation this time around, if they even get there. So many things can play out. Okay, I hope that makes sense, and good luck with reading about it, and don't think of it as chaotic, think of it as a process. This is just about Parliament and whether it grants authority to the government or not.